It's a paradox of the so-called strongman type of leader that they like to look strong, but they're actually very fragile when it comes to criticism and cannot abide criticism. They are extremely sensitive to it, begin cracking down on it as soon as they can, and the general picture is that once they've started, they don't stop.
And it is interesting because here we're seeing reporting, but we've also seen opposition figures in the lead up to this election, this massive election that is now underway, either jailed or sidelined. The opposition has spoken out and said everybody calls India the world's greatest democracy, but is it really a democracy anymore?
Well, there are different gradations of democracy, and, prima facie, you wonder why a leader such as Modi, who is so commandingly far ahead in the polls, I mean, he just has crushing dominance, his re-election is not in any doubt, why he would bother repressing, trying to control criticism, political opponents, all of that. And yet it seems to be inbuilt in the character type. Now, India itself, it obviously is a huge, noisy, thriving electoral democracy. It's had degrees of authoritarianism for many years. Modi's autocratic tendencies continue to push the country in that direction. So, for example, freedom of the press, there's an outfit called Reporters Without Borders that produces an annual ranking of nations according to their degree of press freedom. They rank India 160th, I think, out of 161st out of 180 nations on the planet, which is that's fairly grim ranking. And yet, when Modi took power, it was only already ranked around 120 or so in the world. In other words, despite its outward appearance of being rambunctious, noisy, vibrant, and pluralistic, which in many ways it is. At the same time, there has always been a tendency to try to limit media freedom, and we're only going to see that extending under Modi, particularly on any area that he deems sensitive to himself, anything that he thinks might be embarrassing about himself. And again, it's inherent in this personality type of politician. For example, you've mentioned China, Xi Jinping, the leader of China, who allows no dissent, of course, whatsoever, to the point where he has banned, or his regime has banned, images of Winnie the Pooh because it's been used to, make sly commentary on him on the basis that they're supposed to look somewhat similar. Now, why he would feel threatened, he's been ranked the world's most powerful man, why he would feel threatened by internet images of Winnie the Pooh is difficult to imagine. And yet this personality type, the so-called strongman, is in fact exceptionally sensitive to any form of perceived criticism.
Yeah. Where does it leave our relationship? It's quite interesting that you often see Albanese popping up, the Prime Minister popping up in images with Modi on his recent visit behind this sort of Modi mania. He fully understands how popular Narendra Modi is. How does Australia view this relationship, and does it see it sinking into this kind of greater autocracy, this very strong nationalism that is emerging?
Yes. Well, Australia's position is that India is a great economic future prospect. It's forecast to become the third or fourth biggest economy in the world within the next 20 to 30 years. But it's also seen, importantly, as a strategic counterweight to China. Now, these factors are going to get India a lot of slack in its relationship with Australia. The Australian government will be extremely reluctant to criticise India's increasingly authoritarian leadership. So you can draw a comparison, Bev, with Vietnam. Vietnam is every bit as repressive as China. It's also, of course, one of the last Communist Party-controlled nations on the planet. And yet, because Vietnam is standing up to China, Australia and Vietnam have made common cause on the strategic level and the defence level, and you won't find Australia making criticisms of Vietnam. Similarly with India, and India is a lot more liberal, of course, than Vietnam.
Yeah. It also, India is a partner that we hope to rely on should China get more aggressive and assertive.
Yes. So India was one of the co-leaders with Indonesia of the non-aligned movement right through the Cold War and took great pride in being independent of any of the great powers. But because of China's increasing threats and pressures and violence across the Himalayan border, Modi has tilted towards the West, towards the US, joined the Quad, is perhaps the biggest measurable index of how far India has moved. The Quad, of course, being the US, Japan, Australia, and India. And yes, Australia looks to India as an increasing source of a bulwark, if you like, against Chinese encroachment into the Indian Ocean and into the Indo-Pacific more broadly. So Australia is going to bend over backwards not to be overtly critical of Modi, of India, and as you say, it only enhances Modi's standing in Australia, that the Indian diaspora in Australia, which is 3-4% of the population, has a feverish appreciation for Modi, and no Australian politician will want to alienate that diaspora gratuitously.
Yeah. Always good to get your thoughts, Peter. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure, Beth.